Fix the hair. Come on. There we go. All right. Welcome, everyone, to day 21 of Thriving in the Face of Cancer. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and every day now for the next 11 days, I'll be talking to top doctors and other healthcare professionals, as well as people who have survived cancer and those that are working to help people survive cancer, who'll be giving you insights on how you too can thrive even in the face of cancer. My guest today is Danielle Hicks. She is the Chief Patient Officer at GO2 Lung Cancer. And please welcome her to the show. Nice to see you again.
Hi, AJ. Nice to see you. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I feel like I love the name GO2 Lung Cancer because it's the place to go to if you have lung cancer.
That's the point. That's the point.
Tell me a little bit about your organization and how you got involved with it and how it can help people, especially people with lung cancer or their loved ones.
Absolutely. Thanks, AJ. So as you said, Danielle Hicks, I'm Chief Patient Officer. I've been working in the lung cancer space with people diagnosed as well as their caregivers and loved ones for about 19 years now. My journey with lung cancer began back in 2003 when my mom was diagnosed. After about a year and a half of misdiagnoses, everything from potential heart problems to pinched nerves in her neck to asthma to acid reflux. She finally decided to take matters into her own hands and go out and pay out of pocket for one of those full body scans. And that was when they found it. Unfortunately, she had a tumor in her upper left lobe, but it was hiding behind her heart, so no one could see it on a regular x-ray. So things happened pretty fast and furiously after that. She was diagnosed with stage 3B non-small cell adenocarcinoma. At the time, nobody was doing biomarker testing outside of clinical trials. And she was told to go home and get her affairs in order. As a family, we decided that that wasn't an option, and this is really where my advocacy work began, was with her. Uh, we banded together, pulled together our own multidisciplinary team of doctors. A lot of things happened very serendipitously, and I'm happy to say, without going into all of the details, that she is still here today and one of the co-founders of GO2 for Lung Cancer.
So she is now over 20 years survivor.
Over 20-year survivor. Yep,
That's amazing.
absolutely.
I know she's not doing interviews anymore, darn it, but if she ever comes out of retirement, I would love to interview her. But can people see her story somewhere?
Absolutely. On our website, in the About Us page, there is a link to who she is, who the other co-founder, Lori Ambrose, is. We had the Bonnie J. Dario Lung Cancer Foundation out here on the West Coast, and the Lung Cancer Alliance was headquartered on the East Coast. And it was another real serendipitous thing. Bonnie, my mom, and Lori became friends and collaborators over the years, both working in different areas, so there wasn't a ton of crossover. And they decided to become the powerhouse that we are today by joining forces. So all of
You
that's on our About Us page.
you have a wonderful YouTube channel, and I love this the series you do called The Living Room.
Yeah, yeah. So the lung cancer living room started in 2009. And it was really after having spoken with and met people who had been diagnosed who had said that they'd never met anyone else diagnosed with lung cancer before, which was shocking to me, knowing a lot of people that had had breast cancer who, immediately were connected with this community of peers to support one another. So we brought about 5 or 6 people into what we affectionately call our living room, and asked them what they wanted and what they needed, what gaps that they saw. And through that came the Lung Cancer Living Room, which is really an expert speaker series where we invite experts from across the care continuum, across disciplines, to come in and talk about different aspects of the disease. It's an open forum. It's live in the room as well as live streamed, similar to this, where people have access to these experts that they wouldn't otherwise have access to, so they can ask questions about their own experience in real time.
Yeah, it's wonderful, and we'll link to everything. I know you guys are asking for that, but I have to have
Thanks.
the show. The show needs to get started before I can actually put this
Absolutely.
just with the system I'm having. But maybe you can dispel some of the myths about lung cancer, which are that it's only an old person's disease, or it's only
Yeah.
the people who smoke, because we're
Yeah.
learning that that's absolutely not the case.
It's absolutely not the case. I think, 30 or 40 years ago, however long it's been now, all with the best of intentions. There are groups out there started a lot of anti-smoking campaigns to try to get people to quit smoking. And through some of those campaigns, unfortunately and unknowingly generated this stigma around lung cancer and also generated a false sense of security for those that didn't smoke, that that was the only way that you could get it. And what we know today, when I think about the smoking statistics, we know it's a contributor for sure, right? But so are a lot of other things. And statistically speaking, if you're someone who currently smokes or used to smoke, you have an 80% chance of developing some sort of heart or cardiac issues, but only a 20% chance of smoking. Yet the cardiac patient is not as heavily stigmatized, right, as someone who has been diagnosed with lung cancer. And when I look now, statistically speaking, in fact, the American Cancer Society just released a new report. Particularly in women never smokers, lung cancer is on the rise. And we don't know why. And so there are and is research happening right now. GO2 is doing some, as well as some others in the field, trying to really look at what might be other indicators to put someone at a higher risk, such as outside of things we know, right? Like radon. We know that radon, which is emitted from the ground, is the second biggest contributor to lung cancer. But we also have to think about pollutants and things, exposures that people might not even know that they're coming into. I think about firefighters and first responders; they're at a higher risk. And then we think about familial or potential inherited risk factors, and that's what GO2 and our sister organization Alchemy, which is a research consortium, is looking into right now. Can we identify um, biomarkers that might be within, or germline mutations that you might be born with, that could potentially put you at a higher risk for lung cancer?
That would be so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm not even sure how we connected. I think maybe you responded to one of my social media
I
posts or something.
probably did. I mean, I follow you. I've been on and watched you for a while now. And I think it might have been, I don't know, one of my colleagues who I think put two and two together that maybe this would be a good idea, a good connection for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be having and I think it was I'm meeting so many people, but Francis, who you interviewed, Francis
Yeah.
Spruitt,
Francis Pruitt.
17 years, almost as long as your mom's survivor. He's going to be coming on the show next week, and I'm so thrilled because I feel like stories like your mom's and Francis give people, not even just with lung cancer, with cancer in general, hope to see these long-term survivors. But at what point would a person connect with you, somebody with a loved one that has lung cancer or themselves in their journey? How do you usually end up connecting with the general public? Because
Yeah.
as I said, I don't even really remember how we connected.
Yeah. I mean, first and foremost, Francis Spruitt and his lovely wife, Rosalind, are amazing. They've been connected with GO2 for years, in many different ways. But really, anyone diagnosed, anyone connected to someone that's diagnosed, even healthcare providers, can reach out to us at any time, really, from a person diagnosed and a caregiver perspective. And there's never a bad time. Obviously, the earlier the better, as far as I'm concerned, because the sooner we can help educate, empower, and support anyone with a lung cancer diagnosis, the better for that person. But there are various different ways that people can connect with us. The main sort of way, or the main entry point, I guess, into GO2 is our helpline. And our helpline is a program that is staffed by absolutely incredible GO2 team members that live in the patient support services team with me. They're trained social workers and healthcare professionals who know everything A to Z when it comes to lung cancer. And not only can we help with answering questions for you to ask your healthcare providers. We can help point people in the direction if someone might need financial resources, for example, or any other type of psychosocial support. We're able to help point people in the right direction there. And we sort of triage from that helpline, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, the thing that's I feel that's so interesting about lung cancer is that, I mean, all no, there is no good cancer. So I love when people say you have the good kind of cancer. Like if you have non-small cell, I've heard people with small cells, well, you've got the good kind of cancer, and
Yeah.
I don't really actually think there is a good kind of cancer,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but I
Yeah. I don't,
feel,
go ahead. Sorry.
no, I was just going to say, like, I haven't had other cancers. I had pre-colon cancer, but I feel that it's particularly scary because of the fact that it's respiratory and that, like, you might not be able to breathe at some point. And that just that's just scary to me, you
It is
know?
scary. Lungs are life, right? You need to be able to breathe. And I hear you about the good kind of cancer. There is no good cancer diagnosis, lung or otherwise, early stage or late stage. I know from my own 20-year experience, not only my personal experience with my mom, and other family members, by the way, since then, it's terrifying. And um, trying to find um, a good sources of information and education are near impossible, particularly for the novice, right? Especially if you go on Dr. Google and you just start randomly searching things, quite often you'll find things that are outdated or are incredibly difficult to understand because they are all written at a very high technical level. And lung cancer is a complex disease. It's a very complex disease. It's sort of the good news, bad news, right? 20 years ago, when I started in this, you're right. It was non-small cell and small cell. And the, main treatment options were chemo and radiation. I mean, and that was it. And it was just kind of like throwing pasta at the wall and seeing if something stuck. And in the last 20 years, because lung cancer has sort of come out of the shadows, so many exciting things have happened. I tell people all the time, when I first started going to ASCO back in the early 2000s, and ASCO is the American Society for Clinical Oncology. It's a huge cancer conference that happens in early summer every year in Chicago. When I first started going there, I was just like, what do you call it? I was just constantly in search of information that I could bring back and share with the patient community and the folks that I was working with. And I was really hard pressed to find people working in lung cancer, people researching lung cancer, clinical trials on lung cancer. And I'll tell you, I am there now, and you are hard pressed to find anybody who's not working in lung cancer. And that's both non-small and small cell lung cancer. So for me, it's exciting. I don't necessarily think that translates to exciting for anyone diagnosed, particularly early on, but so many advancements have been made in this space. It truly is incredible. We have a lot of work still to do, and a lot of people, I think, still to reach. I think you touched on this a little bit earlier about stigma. I think particularly people who might have a smoking history for fear of the shame, blame, sort of finger wagging. They don't really go out and talk about their diagnosis or what's going on. I've had people come to me and say, "Oh no, Danielle, I tell people I was diagnosed with breast cancer, not lung cancer, because then at least people will have sympathy for me instead of kind of, shaking their head and asking me whether or not I smoked." So, anyway, I think there's a lot of exciting things happening right now.
Yeah, that's always the first question that anyone with lung cancer gets. Just need to ring the bell. Thank you, Colleen, for your super chat donation. Much, much appreciated it. And let's see, what was it like, watching your mom go through her journey as her daughter?
Yeah, I get that a lot, and my perspective is really from the caregiver side of things, obviously. Um, it was awful. I mean, she was only 56 years old at the time, and my youngest son, I think, was 2.5. And the thought, she was the matriarch of our family, right? And so what we were being told by a really well-known academic center initially really was that she maybe had 6 months to live, was just um, gave such a sense of dread to all of us. Like there was so much life left in her and so much for us left to do, right? And it was a challenge. I mean, I remember when we finally kind of pulled together this team, both from a community and a different academic center. And I remember the surgeon coming in and saying to her, Bonnie, what do you want to do? Because obviously she wasn't a surgical candidate at the time. And she said, I don't want to die because I did nothing, right? She said, I want to fight this. And so what is now a routine sort of therapy protocol back then was not. So she was one of the early, we always joke that she was sort of a guinea pig in the space and it worked out. But she was treated up front with chemoradiation at the same time to try to shrink that tumor and pull it away from her aorta because it had wrapped around her aorta, which is why she was non-surgical. And when they thought they shrunk it enough, she went into a surgery, and we argue about how long this was. I'm like, I was the one in the waiting room. It was about a 17-hour surgery where she had a lobectomy. So they removed the lobe, the thoracic surgical team removed the lobe. And then the cardiothoracic guys came in and did the repairs to her aorta. And she had what's called an open thoracotomy. So it's a big cut in the back, coming from the middle of your back, kind of going around the side. Um, I think video assisted surgery and obviously robotic surgery was not necessarily a thing back then, but also her surgery was very complicated and the recovery period was big. It was big, but we were all here. I think some combination of my dad, my sister, my brother, and I were always at all of her appointments with her, soaking in as much as we can and really encouraging her on the days when she was down. And I remember we used to tell her it's okay to have down days, to have days where you're just mad, you're sad, you're all of those emotions. We just can't live in those days, right? So have those days, let's get through them, and then let's decide to move on to something positive. And it was an incredible experience for me. And I'm so happy that she came out the other side the way she did. And she swore that if she came out, and this is a quote from her, the other side of the knothole, that she was going to do something to see to it that people who were diagnosed after her didn't have to jump through so many hoops to find access to information and quality care. And that's exactly what we've done.
Well, I love your mother because that's exactly the same thought I had because I struggled for 2 years trying to just even get, I mean, get any kind of services. And so if we can make this easier for one person that's diagnosed to not have to jump through all those hoops or go through the waiting period that I did, it's worth it. And that's why
I
I
agree.
started this series. So we have a question from a live viewer. Why do you think the rates are increasing so much faster for women than for men?
It's really interesting. And I wish I had an answer to that. I'm happy to take that to the powers that be that I know are working on it. It's so fascinating because we've watched this trend, particularly over the last decade, where we know that smoking rates have dropped. We know that smoking is a large contributor, although, as we've already talked about, not the only contributing factor. But we've seen lung cancer diagnoses drop in men and increase in women. And I think that's one of the reasons so many people are interested. I mentioned Alchemy a little bit earlier, the Adario Lung Cancer Medical Institute, and I'm happy to share links with you to share with your audience, where we've done some studies looking at young lung cancer. So why is this happening in younger people, primarily women? Right now, we have an epidemiology study to try to look into exactly what we're kind of talking about, like what there has to be something else. So what is it? So it doesn't just look at your potential exposure risks. Did you work, as a firefighter, like I said earlier, to keep that example kind of going here? Do you have family history? Where do you live? What kind of foods do you eat? Really trying to look at those common denominators. And then the second one is this inherited um, risk factor that never before was lung cancer was never thought to be something that can be inherited. And GO2 and Alchemy did a study several years ago called Inherit, looking in particular, one of the mutations in lung cancer is called EGFR. And a submutation to EGFR is called T790M. It was always thought to be a resistance mutation. So in other words, you were being treated for EGFR and somewhere along the way, the cancer got smart enough, and I hate to use the word smart when it comes to cancer, but oops, there goes my balloons. I'm so sorry I have that
Oh, no,
on.
that's great. I love it. It's so cute.
Sometimes it does that. I've got something
It's
linked.
fabulous.
Anyway, apologies. Um, so the cancer gets smart and it figures a way around the drug that's stopping it from growing, and it can create what's called resistance mutations. And so this T790M was always thought to be that. And with the study that we did, we actually found that T790M was in fact a germline mutation. So it's something that you could be born with. And so we just launched a study this last spring, Inherit 2.0, expanding the germline risk factor outside of just EGFR, that mutation that I talked about. And we're really hoping to find some commonalities there and things that can actually help people. Right now, when thinking about early diagnosis of the disease, all we really have is low dose CT screening, right? But the qualifying criteria for that, um, in my very humble opinion, is not good enough because it's only for people who have a smoking history, only for people between the ages of 50 and 80. And we know that people are coming in droves that fall outside of those parameters, um, um, that are being diagnosed with lung cancer. And by the time you're symptomatic, it's typically advanced disease.
Yeah, that's the I mean, there's so many unfortunate things about cancer, but that's the interesting thing to me because it's 2.5 years and I still don't have any symptoms of any kind of pulmonary thing. I have symptoms of anxiety from
Of
being
course.
told I have cancer. And I did not realize that it was so symptomless or symptom free. And I mean, that's really scary because then there's no way, because, like with a breast, you can, feel a lump,
Yeah.
right?
Do
And like
self-exams.
your mother, my tumor has been hiding behind my heart for who knows how long. That's why, when you think about it, I've had chest x-rays my whole life being an asthmatic or just as part of a physical, but it never would show up because
Yeah.
it's hiding behind the heart.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was back when the early studies were being done, was looking at low dose CT versus X-ray, because an X-ray is two-dimensional, right? So tumors have places that they can hide when you're just looking at a two-dimensional picture, which is why low dose CT is so important. And I know, when I think right now, about the numbers of people in the United States alone that qualify for screening, even based on those risk factors, it's roughly, well, with new ACS recommendations taking away, one of the qualifying criteria is also you either have to be a current smoker or have quit within the last 15 years, which is also ridiculous as far as I'm concerned. So ACS is recommending getting rid of that 15-year quit date, which really opens it up to about 16 million people in the US alone. And of those 16 million people, roughly 7% are actually being screened. And we know if we find lung cancers early, there's a higher likelihood that we can cure them.
You talked about low dose CT. So is that something we can be requesting? Because, I'm getting CT scans like every 3 to 6 months, and I never thought to ask, can I say, hey, give me a low dose one, or how does
They
that work?
typically don't do low dose once someone has been diagnosed. It has to do with the resolutions and what they're trying to pick up, any rogue cells, that might have gone off and gone somewhere. So they typically won't do low dose outside of screening. And I should say, because I know a lot of people are concerned about the amount of radiation coming from CAT scans. And the reality is, and this is another one of my frustrations, I travel a lot for work. And there's no sign at the airport when I'm getting on a plane letting me know about the radiation that I will be exposed to when I'm flying from here to Florida, for say, right? And it's the exact same amount of radiation you'll get in a low dose CT scan. So it is very minimal. Um, and in my opinion, and it does not have to be everyone's opinion, the risk or the reward, I should say, outweighs any potential risks from a low dose CT.
Yeah. I know you have you can talk about some of the other things that you do with GO2 lung cancer, like your summit and your gala, but I'm thinking I'm working really hard to develop a stand-up comedy set based on cancer. And I'm thinking, one of the ways I'm thinking are things, like what not to say to a person with cancer or lung cancer. But,
Mhm.
I keep thinking about the people that for their first question is, do you smoke? And so I mean, and so if we say, let's say we say yes. Okay, so then what? Then what is your next thing? Oh, well, you deserve it, or
Mhm.
I mean, I'm so curious why. Like
Yeah.
if somebody told me something really bad or sad, I mean, I might be interested to know, like, why do you think you got it? Or do you have a family history? But that wouldn't be the first thing out of my mouth. The first thing would be like, gosh, I'm so sorry. How are you dealing
Oh,
with that? But
I
I got to
know.
tell you, having this experience, like 99 out of 100 people, did you smoke?
I know.
You
I
know,
know.
it's so annoying.
It's annoying. It's infuriating, actually. I mean, I have my own thoughts and opinions about why people ask that question. And I think I might have said this a little bit ago. I think if they don't have a smoking history, there's a sense of security for them to know that someone smoked and that's how they got it. So they feel, I guess, safer, insofar as not having to be concerned about being diagnosed with lung cancer, which we in fact know is not true. Um, I think, you know, the flip side of that is even people who are diagnosed. I had this conversation with this man. He's in his 40s, he's in Tennessee, and he was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And he's actually been on the living room before, and we've had multiple conversations. And he had been sort of self-identifying as having never smokers lung cancer. And I understand also why people will self-identify that way, right? I have never smokers or smoking lung cancer because it makes them feel like now they aren't going to get blamed or shamed. But what it's doing is further sort of bifurcating the community into smokers and never or non-smokers. And I don't know that that's necessarily helpful to anyone. And he was like, wow, Danielle, I never really thought about it that way before, right? And so I think we really have to flip the narrative on its head. I think that people sharing their stories and humanizing this disease and this diagnosis is incredibly helpful, because it it shows people that anyone, I mean, it can be your neighbor, it can be your mailman, it can be your grocery store clerk, it can be your mother, your brother, your sister, your aunt, you know. So when we say anyone can get lung cancer, anyone can get lung cancer,
Yeah, assuming they have lungs.
assuming they have
Yeah.
lungs, right?
So, yeah, and I would imagine that, when it comes to funding, it would be less because of the stigmatization.
Yep. That so the stigma has driven a lot of the um, negativity, including funding. Although that's also changing. When I think about federal funding in particular, GO2 has been heavily involved in government affairs and policy work and getting legislation passed to increase funding for lung cancer. And for every lung cancer death versus, for example, a breast cancer death, for every $18 that goes to breast cancer, $1 goes to lung cancer. And that might have changed slightly, but not enough for those numbers not to be really, really relevant now. And I also think for our industry partners who are big supporters of the work that we do and other organizations out there do, and they fund, their own independent research. Now that lung cancer is sort of coming out of the shadows, we have identified these biomarkers that I talked about. There's immunotherapies on the market, and there's a lot of work happening. More money is coming in through the door. But even from a philanthropic standpoint, if you can imagine people who give annually to their favorite charities, if they also aren't aware of the realities of this disease, that anyone can get it, I could see where they might be feeling like they're sort of giving money into this empty bucket, right? And so I really, really believe that being able to change the narrative, generate true awareness around lung cancer, um, the who can get it, the why people get it, um, will help with all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think about the fires in LA and how, I mean, even just all the respiratory possibilities of problems that people I used to live there are going to have just, from that.
Down the road, yeah, first responders. So GO2 works really closely with the VA and our veterans. We know that all of our men and women have been exposed to multiple agents, to burn pits, to a lot of different potential carcinogens. And so we work closely with them on ensuring that veterans have access to screening and early detection. And similarly, we're looking at firefighters and first responders. How do we work with them to ensure that they have access? And right now, I think it's really state by state, really county by county, and how that works. My son's a firefighter, so this is a real concern for me in particular. I have a cousin who's a firefighter. And as I was watching what was happening down in LA, tragically, what was happening down in LA, and all of those tens of thousands of people impacted, it was one of the first things that came to my mind. I mean, you watch these videos and you see this black smoke, burning up these homes and everything in the homes, the plastics, the chemicals, all of that. You just think, boy, how can we do a better job in supporting our first responders, for
Right.
sure.
And having lived in LA, I can tell you the air quality was not great to begin with.
Yes, agreed. That smog is a real thing.
So, in terms of deaths from cancer, where does lung cancer fall?
Lung cancer is the largest cancer killer. It beats out colon, breast, and prostate combined. Roughly in the United States, about 225, 230,000 people are diagnosed every year. And sadly, we lose between 130 and 150,000 people every year from the
Yeah.
disease.
Are there celebrities that have it or have had it? I mean, like, because it seems like a lot of times if you could just get like a big celebrity to back a cause,
Yeah,
people.
yeah. Again, I think stigma is associated here too. GO2 has had celebrities in the past come forward. We have a PSA that's out right now with Tony Goldwyn, who sadly lost his mom to lung cancer. We just launched our new PSA. And if I didn't link it for you, I will because he does a fabulous job really talking about risk and early detection. But I think we need to get more people caring, for lack of a better word. We need more people to care, and to stand up. It's glamorous to stand up for something like breast cancer. And I don't mean to, I keep using breast cancer as an example only because we would love nothing more than to emulate the work that they've done and to get to where they are. That's not to say that they still don't have a long way to go, particularly for metastatic disease. But when I think about early detection and screening and mammography and how far that has brought that sort of curve down of getting people diagnosed early. We want those same things, but people like to attach themselves to successful things, right? And I think that that the celebrity industry is the same way. Maybe you and I can help change that together.
Yeah, well, I will help any way I can shed awareness on this, and that's why I'm doing these shows. But have you seen some, not maybe in terms of support or funding, but have you seen advances since your mom was diagnosed? Because I'm guessing that 20 years ago they didn't have immunotherapy.
They did not have immunotherapy and they did not have targeted therapy. So um, um, in the last primarily the last 15 years, but really it's been going on for the last 20 years. What we have found is there's targeted therapies and there's immunotherapies. And then there's for people outside of targeted immunotherapies, there's standard chemo radiation combination therapies. But targeted therapies really, they hit the market before immunotherapies did. And really, it's looking down genetically, molecularly, into seeing if we can identify what's driving your cancer. I have a healthcare provider that I just adore, Dr. David Gandera from UC Davis, and he spoke at one of my living rooms and he explained targeted therapy in a way that just made so much sense to me. He said, picture, these all of these different biomarkers or genomic alterations on the bus. If we can figure out which one of those alterations is actually the bus driver and we know what's driving the bus, then we can specifically target it with approved therapies to target that specific mutation. Right now, there's about 10 mutations that have been identified as driving lung cancer that have FDA approved therapies associated with them. And then immunotherapy is really fascinating to me because it has really unlocked our own immune systems and helping our own immune systems, which the cancer is hiding from, to be able to identify and then kill off the cancer. So it's really been remarkable. Where lung cancer was sort of, at the end of the line, as I mentioned, 20 or so years ago when I started going to ASCO, now they're really leading the way for other cancers, particularly in looking at biomarkers related to targeted therapies and immunotherapies.
That's so cool. Hey,
Yeah.
talk about your phone buddy program.
Yeah, so we have multiple ways that we support our community, recognizing that not everything is for everyone. Not everyone wants to come and sit in the living room in person and meet other people. Not everyone, um, you know, wants to get their access to educational information all in one lump sum. Some people just want small bites of information. So we really have a comprehensive education and support programs. Our Phone Buddy program is one of them, and it's a peer-to-peer matching or mentorship program where someone who has been diagnosed with lung cancer volunteers to be a phone buddy, and then we match people who are a little newer into their experience with someone as closely matched to them as possible. So, if you're a female who's been diagnosed with stage 4 ALK positive lung cancer who lives in California and is still working and maybe has a couple of kids, we'll try to match you with someone as close to your experience as possible. We've got phone buddies all over the country. It's a really amazing program where these folks just really learn. They educate one another and they support one another right through the process because there's nothing like being able to talk to somebody who's walking the walk. I can talk to people till I'm blue in the face, but I'm not walking in their shoes like these phone buddies are.
Yeah, and that's amazing. And all this is provided free.
All of our services are provided free. We have, as I mentioned, a comprehensive education library where people can go, both healthcare providers, patients, and caregivers alike can go and order from our online store and we will ship to you hard copies. Or if you're more immediate and you need it right now, you can download the copies right from there. And like I said, those materials are available in what we affectionately call bite, snack, and meal size pieces. So if you're someone who just wants a little bit of information about one thing, maybe it's a double-sided one pager. If you want a booklet because you want a little bit more information, we have booklets available. If you want the whole kit and caboodle, we have comprehensive education handbooks that really start at the beginning and run all the way through the care continuum and even survivorship.
Yeah, and so we're going to get those in the show notes. Julia sent them to me, but they're a
Oh,
little
good.
bit longer than I can fit in, so she's going to need to edit them just a tiny bit so we
Yeah,
can get all that other than your general website. But
sure.
I'm curious, like if I had heard of you or found you 2.5 years ago, I mean, I wonder what position I would have been in mentally and emotionally, because I mean, I didn't even know what to Google, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. What we do know is from surveying and conversations that we have with the people that we do connect with, they really attribute their patient empowerment to the support and education that GO2 has given them. Their ability to go in, have shared decision-making conversations with the healthcare providers because they actually know what they're talking about. They understand what their options are and are able to be part of that decision-making. A cancer diagnosis is one of those things I think where people feel like they've lost control of all things. And so this empowerment and education is really helping to take back some control so that you can be part of those conversations and that, like I said, that decision making. So I think that is an important piece. And again, patients share stories with us both in video and in written form all the time. And I'd love to share your story on our patient blog. And people really find hope um, when they come to us, when they connect with other people, when they do feel like they've been able to take back some control and have a better understanding of what's happening in their body and what their options are. And hope is king in this place, right? A cancer diagnosis, I know for most can feel like a really hopeless place. And I am confident that the work we do at GO2 brings hope back into the paradigm.
Yeah, it must be very rewarding to be able to do work that it helps people in the way that your
It
organization does.
Yeah, it really is. For me personally, I know we talked a little bit about my mom, and that's honestly where it started, but it's come so much farther than that for me. The thousands and thousands of people that I've met, them, their families. I've been to weddings. I've done all of the stuff. is really inspiring to me, really inspiring.
Mm. Well, I'm curious, like, what message of hope would you share with somebody first facing any type of a cancer diagnosis, especially lung cancer
Yeah.
diagnosis?
You know, in talking to people, what I want people most to know is that they're not alone. Um, that we are here in whatever capacity they need us to be. And this isn't necessarily just for the person diagnosed, because loved ones need support too. And we're a different kind of support, and we're here for that. But I'd mostly want people to know that we're not alone, and we're here to help support and guide them through every aspect of their journey or experience. And I think it's, I can talk about it till I'm blue in the face and it looks nice on paper, but I've talked to a lot of people who say until I took that leap and that step and, interacted with one or more of your programs, I just didn't know how much I would get out of it. So I would say, try to find the courage to reach out and just see, because you never know what's around the corner. And like I said, the community, when I see these people together, either at our events nationally, at our conferences nationally, at the living room monthly, um, there's family there. I mean, a family has been created, um, and like I said, a ton of hope. In our lung cancer living room, we have a huge sign on the wall. It's probably 10 feet tall, and that's what it says is hope.
Well,
And that's
that just I love the song that you play at the beginning of all your videos is just I love that song. We'll have to somehow link to it for the people to listen to it.
yeah, absolutely. I would love to do that. It's a really great song. A young man named Casey Hurt wrote uh, and sing. He's the singer in that song, and he so graciously lent it to us for the living room. So
Yeah. Did you talk about your big conference in Washington, D.C. yet?
I did not. So that is coming up in March. I did send that to you in the show notes. So every year, about 200 to 300 people from the lung cancer community, primarily patients and caregivers, hit Washington, D.C. There are scholarships available for people who are diagnosed to be able to get there. Training is provided. We have one day of sessions where we learn a little bit more about what's happening right now in lung cancer, but we also learn about how to talk to our legislators in order to advocate for more federal funding. Francis, who you said is kind of beyond shortly, he and his wife Rosalind participate every year, so he can speak to what that journey looks like if he wants to. But it's really an amazing couple of days where again that community is brought together. And we marched the hill. I remember the first time I did it was even before we had merged with Lung Cancer Alliance, because they were the policy sort of arm of the lung cancer space. They were really leading the space. And I remember the first time I went, I was really nervous. Like, I have to go talk to, our legislators, and these are really high, powerful people. It's kind of felt like a 16-year-old getting pulled over by a police officer, right? Just that authority figure or whatever. These are amazing people. Their staffers are amazing, and they want to hear stories from people's own experiences with this disease, because the people are who help affect this change. And that's really what our Voices Summit aims to do.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm noticing for everybody that has cancer that has survived. I think almost all of them become an advocate in one way or another.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree. I mean, I think again, it's empowering. It's a sense of belonging. It's a sense of community. It's a sense of control, all of those things.
Yeah. Well, just like, we talked about earlier on, anybody with lungs can get lung cancer. I've kind of woken up my vegan community that I've been a proud member of for almost 50 years, because there was some prevailing belief that, like, if you just eat this perfect vegan diet, you're immune from all diseases, including
Yeah.
cancer. And guess what, guys?
Yeah.
It sure increases your odds, but you're not bulletproof.
Yeah, it's very true. I had a doctor from Dana-Farber one time, someone who was diagnosed asked, like, why? Why did I get lung cancer? I don't have any known risk factors. And, he said he was pretty blunt about it, but he said, bad luck. He said, we all every day have cells that mutate and go bad in our bodies. And more often than not, our immune system is able to identify and kill them before they land somewhere and turn into something terrible, but not always, right? So, yeah, there's definitely things we can do, to your point, to help decrease the odds for a lot of things, not just cancer, right? Um, but no one's immune.
That's right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show for the work you do. And if your mom ever decides to come out of
I will tell her
retirement,
for sure.
she is just as inspirational as you. Thank you so much, Danielle.
Absolutely. Thanks, AJ. Good to
My
be here.
pleasure. And
All right.
thanks all of you for watching day 21 of Thriving in the Face of Cancer. We want you to know that wherever you are in your cancer journey, as long as you're still breathing, we believe there's still hope and that you too can thrive even in the face of cancer. Please tune in tomorrow at 11 a.m. Pacific time for Dr. Roger Schwalt. He'll be discussing the science of forgiveness and why it's good for your health. Thanks again, Danielle.
Thanks, AJ.